Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Sean. I'm your host. I don't even know why I'm wasting your time with this introduction, because 27 different giant news items happened, and I have to cover them all, and I'm preparing for a trip to Fort Worth, Texas to do the Better Discourse 3 event at the end of the week. So we're going to do Julius Jones, we're going to do all the other things that you guys know for a fact I'm going to make videos on, but probably one of the most important updates that we've gotten to any news story we've been following closely was what was dropped on the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, a video that was held in secret by the FBI for all this time that completely changes the narrative and further exonerates Kyle Rittenhouse of all of his actions. But before we get into this relative gold mine of information, before we talk about the lack of nobility that the FBI has withholding this exculpatory evidence, we have a sponsor, and I can't figure out what even is quite the name even. I understand that everyone isn't really interested in precious metals. A lot of you, and believe me, I mean a lot of you, have told me about property, or crypto, or leveraged investments, and all of that looks really good at what looks like is the tippy top, the peak of the market. But the thing is, precious metals are a hedge against inflation and disaster. And what we're hearing about right now are supply chain shortages, rising inflation that the government is barely able to deny anymore. And of course, we're not even talking about the $25 trillion in debt. What a precious metals IRA can do for you is secure part of your portfolio. Now, if you're looking for something safer, a hedge on your other investments, then I think it's time for you to contact Noble Gold about one of their precious metals IRAs. Gold and silver in times of crises, you can look it up, tend to rise when everything else is falling. This is because this is traditional old school money that has never been worth zero. And there's lots of tax advantages in going with a Noble Gold IRA. So if you're interested in investing safer, if you want to minimize some or a lot of your risk, go to noblegoldinvestments.com, use my custom URL in the description, or call them at 877-646-5347. Again, that's noblegoldinvestments.com, custom URL in the pinned comment and the top of the description, so that you can hedge against inflation. So we've been talking about Kyle Rittenhouse a lot on this channel lately, and I've gone over the case in excruciating detail. We've reviewed the videos. We talked through every aspect of the case, specifically Wisconsin self-defense law, and all of this was contingent on the fact that we didn't know exactly what happened, precipitating the first confrontation between Kyle Rittenhouse and Joseph Rosenbaum. Now, I talked about how under Wisconsin self-defense law, sections 2A and 2B, which we've reviewed a bunch of different times, they're going to be on screen. Kyle Rittenhouse fleeing this situation, even if he started this encounter, makes him eligible to claim self-defense in this situation. People have this weird, ridiculous view of self-defense laws in this nation, and it's quite literally the schoolyard view of self-defense. That if you start a confrontation, literally everything that happens beyond the point where you started is somehow the fault of the person who started it. That is not how the law works. Imagine this situation. If somebody goes to carjack somebody else, in that situation, in many states in this country, the castle doctrine, which extends to vehicles, could be enforced, and that person could shoot and kill the carjacker dead. You know, carjackers like Julius Jones, you get that reference. Now, if the carjacker runs away because he gets scared off, and the person who was carjacked then chases down the carjacker and then tries to kill the carjacker after the confrontation initially ended, this whole new confrontation, there's a whole new set of rules in terms of self-defense in the state of Wisconsin. And now that previous carjacker would be able to defend themselves. So this is how we've been talking about the Rittenhouse case. And the reason why we wanted to talk about the Rittenhouse case on this channel in this manner is because we wanted to give the maximum credibility to the left side of the spectrum, to the prosecution, so that we could take it down, because even when we accept the basic premises and don't go based on what the video and all the contextual evidence shows us, the video ultimately shows Kyle Rittenhouse acting lawfully and in self-defense. However, we don't have to do that anymore. We don't have to give credence to the left-wing argument, to the prosecution's argument, because it has been exposed that the FBI was hanging on to drone and other footage that shows us exactly how the confrontation started. And it turns out the supposedly damning evidence that the prosecution was holding on to, this 11th hour footage from the FBI that supposedly showed Kyle Rittenhouse chasing Joseph Rosenbaum and engaging in the confrontation, in no way, shape, or form shows that. However, what it does show, beyond any shadow of a doubt, is Joseph Rosenbaum initiating an ambush against Kyle Rittenhouse while he was confronted by another armed leftist who was angry at him that he was putting out fires, rendering medical aid to people, and genuinely being a helpful guy around this chaotic rioting situation. Now, I'm going to play the footage. It's crappy in terms of quality, but you can clearly see what's going on, or at least understand what's going on, even with the low quality that we're dealing with. But first, I want to draw your attention to something incredibly important that was, without this footage, not that notable, but all of a sudden, with this new context, becomes incredibly notable. Joseph Rosenbaum, the first person killed by Kyle Rittenhouse, the person who unequivocally chased Kyle Rittenhouse, cornered him, and reached for the gun twice, according to the prosecution's own charging document, is seen earlier in the day wearing a shirt like normal. He's wearing the shirt on his body, how a shirt is normally worn. Now, that being said, at the time that Rosenbaum engages in the encounter with Kyle Rittenhouse, he is not wearing his shirt as a normal person would. In fact, he is wearing his shirt up around his face as if it's some kind of a mask. Now, we understand we're in the era of COVID and coronavirus, but he wasn't wearing it before, and coronavirus didn't get stronger in the couple of hours that he was out on the street. We also understand, and it would have been logical to presume, that maybe something related to the tear gas somehow impacted how he was reacting and using his shirt. However, this assumption that we made that was logical is null and void right now, because what we found out through this video, and again, it starts off with Kyle Rittenhouse running to problems at Car Source Location 2, because there's people breaking windows and causing all kind of havoc with a fire extinguisher.
Man, bro. Trailer.
Yeah, these stupid wait.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they definitely need that trash can to put their garbage out. Oh, he's blocking the road. So now we're out by Frederick. So a large crowd over here smashing the SUVs. I think
the drone footage, and again, the footage is really crappy and it's pieced together, and I understand, but bear with us, shows that Rosenbaum starts running in the same direction. Now, the prosecution stupidly, unbelievably, idiotically assumed that this was Rittenhouse chasing Rosenbaum, but if you follow the footage to its logical conclusion, you will see that if Rittenhouse was chasing Rosenbaum, then when Rosenbaum decided to make a right, Rittenhouse, who would have had a clear line of sight, again, if this was the guy that he was chasing after, could have easily followed him. However, Rittenhouse stayed straight and only made a right around a different SUV. And this is the key and crucial moment, because Rosenbaum, according to this infrared footage, is peeking out at Kyle Rittenhouse, looking for an opportunity for him to turn his back. But what is happening in front of Kyle Rittenhouse? This is new information, again, that is quite interesting, that wasn't out in the public before, but thank you, FBI, for giving us this piece of information, by mistake, by the way, that helps us piece this together. You see, Kyle Rittenhouse is currently being confronted by a 6'5" man with a gun and his wife. And Kyle Rittenhouse responds to this confrontation, which is quite vulgar. by yelling friendly, 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 indicating that he's not a threat and he doesn't want to get into any kind of altercation. However, what Kyle doesn't realize is that the people that he's talking to are a threat, and they specifically want to get into an altercation with him. Now, the man who brandished the handgun is named Joshua Zeminski. Joshua Zeminski confronted Kyle and moved toward him aggressively with a handgun. Kelly Zeminski, Joshua Zeminski's wife, begins pointing directly at Kyle and shouting, "Get him." Bystanders start yelling threats, and they're carrying 8-foot steel poles. So again, Rittenhouse, who's running with the fire extinguisher, not trying to start any problems, is yelling friendly, friendly, friendly to give everybody a clear indication that he's not looking for a confrontation. He's just looking to stop property damage and stop people from getting hurt. In fact, one of the prosecution's witnesses testified that the only person who is rendering first aid to anybody that he saw was in fact Kyle Rittenhouse, is being confronted by people who want to start a fight with him. And again, I'll let you hear what they had to say. Now, Rosenbaum, the alleged victim, according to the prosecution, the person who, according to the prosecution and their asinine theory, Kyle Rittenhouse chased over, and despite the fact that he was actively engaging in chasing Rosenbaum, allowed him to peel off right and hide between two cars, sneaks out from behind the cars and tries to get the jump on Kyle. Kyle notices Rosenbaum over his shoulders, and what does Kyle do? Does he turn around, pull out his gun, and shoot Rosenbaum? No, he flees the situation. He senses danger. He was shouting friendly as he was heading over. He was calling out for people who needed medical attention. He was running with a fire extinguisher, and he was encountered with a trap, and he decided to flee the situation rather than hurt anybody. Now, we all know how the video goes from here. It's all laid out in the charging documents. This is all footage from this point on that you guys have seen a million times. Rosenbaum throws the bag at Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse tries to get away, gets stuck in the parking lot, and then ultimately, after Rosenbaum reaches for the gun not once but twice, Kyle Rittenhouse fires upon Rosenbaum. But what we didn't know up until this point, because the FBI was withholding this footage, is that Rosenbaum has some last words that maybe indicate his state of mind. Remember, the prosecution says he's a peaceful guy, didn't do nothing, he's a great hero, and don't worry about all the bad things that he said earlier in the day. He just happened to switch his shirt from being on his body to a mask and happened to be hiding behind SUVs looking for an opportunity to jump out at Rittenhouse, who ran away, and then he happened to pursue him, and then he just happened to go for his gun twice. Says this as his last words. Now again, I understand that this video isn't very clear. I understand that it's infrared footage, but this is what the prosecution is telling us about this video. They are saying that this dot right here, that is Joseph Rosenbaum. They're saying that this is Kyle Rittenhouse. This is indisputable based on the context of the other videos. The only thing we didn't have video coverage of before was Rosenbaum hiding around the SUVs waiting to attack Rittenhouse. According to the prosecution, despite the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse clearly saw Rosenbaum bank right, Kyle was chasing Rosenbaum. This is clearly ridiculous and absurd, and Rosenbaum was not the aggressor, despite the fact that, again, we see this dot moving around, and when Kyle notices this dot, he runs away. And this is covered by the footage. This leads into the iconic footage of the plastic bag being thrown, and this totally obliterates any chance of the prosecution making the case that Kyle Rittenhouse was the aggressor. So think about what happened here. Think about what has been allowed to go on all this time while the FBI had exculpatory evidence that would have got Kyle Rittenhouse off, as if the mountain of evidence that was already on his side wasn't enough. They withheld it. They hid it. The prosecution talked about this video in pretrial hearings, but they slow delivered this video evidence to the defense. You're supposed to disclose all of the evidence that you plan to use, anything you have, to the defense. It is a crime not to do so. You can get disbarred for not doing so, but the FBI was slow peddling this information that was important to Kyle's case to the defense. Now, before I overstep my bounds and claim that the feds acted illegally, I want to be clear that the feds have a whole bunch of rules and regulations that basically exempt them from all of the checks and balances that they should have, and every other law enforcement agency does in fact have, so this might not technically be illegal. However, This is unbelievably unethical. The fact that they're feeding this information to the prosecution, and then the prosecution is talking about how they've received this evidence, is talking it up to the media, is allowing the left-wing spin doctors to run with this narrative even though they haven't seen the footage, and the defense, who is supposed to have access to everything the prosecution has to wait as the FBI drags their feet and delays to respond both in the public and in the court of law, is absolutely unethical and shameful and embarrassing. This is not how our system is supposed to work. This is government thuggery and people leaking information piece by piece in order to get the outcome in the media that they want, because they know they can't win in a court of law. They know they can't prove Kyle Rittenhouse's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They know that they basically can't prove that Kyle Rittenhouse isn't completely innocent because it's beyond a reasonable doubt that he acted in self-defense. If the burden of proof was flipped, Kyle Rittenhouse, I would say, would still win this case. That's how solid, that's how much of a slam dunk this is against the prosecution. They should have never charged Kyle. They should have never put him up on $1 million bail. They should have never allowed the left-wing scumbag media to smear this kid when he clearly and unambiguously acted in self-defense, and there's no argument against it. Remember, the first shooting is what all of this is based on. Unequivocally and undeniably, the people in the second shooting came up to Kyle with a gun, a skateboard. They were screaming, "Beat his ass," as Kyle Rittenhouse was running to the police to turn himself in. They have no case unless they make Joseph Rosenbaum out to be the victim. But that's kind of difficult when you have video of Rosenbaum setting up an ambush for Kyle Rittenhouse, hiding behind a car, peeking around it, and going for the attack. When his last words, when Kyle is just trying to get this guy to stop, are him saying F you and then reaching for the gun. That doesn't really show a modest intent just to disarm this young man and teach him a lesson about gun safety. That shows malice and forethought, and considering Rosenbaum is a convicted felon and thus a felony prohibited possessor, that shows intent to break the law, and Kyle had every expectation that if he allowed his gun to be disarmed by this person, whether he knew he was a felon or not, obviously he did not know, that this gun would be used in nefarious ways. He had a moral obligation, just like every gun owner has a moral obligation, not to let somebody obtain your firearm, especially when they've shown you clear evidence that they're looking to do some damage to you or other people with it. Now, I don't know what tricks the prosecution is going to have up its sleeve going forward. As I pointed out during the course of the trial, I realized that these people aren't schmucks. They're not unsophisticated prosecutors. They know how to argue in a case, and there's a chance that Kyle Rittenhouse can be convicted because, again, the jury is always the human element. Now, I don't think that any of the evidence warrants it. I think that the evidence is overwhelming for self-defense. This is nothing like the Chauvin case where you're trying to prove reasonable doubt. Kyle's actually innocent according to the evidence. But I did hear a rumor, by the way, if you're worried about the prosecution, that they might be calling an expert to testify in this case that Kyle Rittenhouse did in fact commit the most serious crime of all, which is, of course, crossing state lines. This expert will also testify that Kyle Rittenhouse was in a different state than Illinois, because Wisconsin is actually a different state than Illinois. And in fact, even though the Supreme Court has ruled that under 18s can't get the death penalty because they're minors, if you cross state lines, you are eligible for the death penalty, even in the state of Wisconsin. And that's what this expert is going to testify to.
Who crossed state lines. He drove from Illinois to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now, again, he drove from Illinois to Wisconsin. It's not like he was in his front yard. Yeah. And he was approached by a group of individuals who posed an imminent threat to his life. He drove across state lines in a state that he doesn't even live in, and then he crossed state lines with it. He crossed state lines, meaning he traveled across state lines. He traveled there from out of state, who again traveled across state lines.
Come on, guys, you knew I had to do it. You knew I had to play somewhere in this video the cross state lines thing for all the idiot lefties who think that that is remotely relevant, let alone a crime on its own. But yeah, the FBI totally shameful in this case. The prosecution unbelievably unethical in this case. Kyle Rittenhouse deserves to be free. He is not guilty. He clearly acted in self-defense. And this latest evidence withheld by the FBI until the 11th hour shows it. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, you can show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social media. Support me via the support links in the description box. Follow me on Instagram. It's new. Till next time.